I think you might have even been one of the people who like real quickly suggested that I do this this podcast. It's great. I mean, there is so much here, and there's even more. I'm trying to decide right now whether I want to do even another video on it. So we shall see. There's definitely a part here where she starts talking about the oral tradition and how the sort of game of telephone, so to speak, is actually really reliable. Yes, and what's funny is that is something that Joe has brought up multiple times as being a reason he doesn't trust the Bible, is because it's just a bunch of oral tradition. But one of the things Diana points out is actually how reliable the oral tradition is. So that will be interesting. That will be interesting to see where that goes. So, and I think, and I haven't read her books. There's so much here that you could go into. So I'm really enjoying this podcast. We'll see where it goes. Okay, so I want to do something. I want to show you guys something. And I want to get your feedback on it. And I want to know if I'm making this up. So you tell me if there's something here or not. And I hope the audio plays.
That's, this is where I get...
Okay, I think I've got audio. Hopefully it's not too loud. Okay, let me know if this is too loud. But this is actually... I have not interviewed Josh Peck. I would love to do more interviews. In fact, I sat down today to talk with Christian Baxter, and it's okay. This is a Q&A. So if you're watching this after the live stream, feel free to ask questions as well. But I want to do more interviews. I think interviews is one of the next things that we do on this podcast. I will just stick to my schedule, usually releasing something on Monday, and then we'll do a live stream, sort of Q&A, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then maybe do some more interview type stuff. I've got a few interviews actually lined up, so we'll see. Joe is opening up to the concept of Christianity. It's like a complete 180 from his dismissive attitude. 7 years ago. Yeah, it's so funny. And Mandy, your point is well taken, because one of the things that I do is I'm like, am I just a Joe Rogan fanboy? Okay, maybe, but I think that Joe Rogan's podcast is in a way acting like a barometer for culture. I think a lot of people had that experience over the last few years of realizing, hey, maybe the Bible is onto something here. Hey, maybe these Christians aren't all totally crazy. Maybe there's something to this. So you're 100% right. Now listen to this. Okay. This was, and so I have been covering Joe's podcast for a year. I've been listening to it for a little bit longer. But I've been, in a sense, attempting to create another layer of dialogue built off of the dialogue that Joe is having. So I did his conversation with Duncan Trussel. This is 209. They've had another conversation since then. And this one was fascinating. I did a podcast on this, and I think I've used clips before. But 209, if anybody's following Joe Rogan, this should clue you in. 208 was when he interviewed Stephen Meyer, the Christian apologist, about the existence of God. And that's Meyer's big thing. And so 208 is Stephen Meyer, 209 is Duncan Trussel. And listen to this is so funny. Yeah, Joe's eyes are opening. Now, you tell me, I've got a bit of a headache, so I'm trying my headphones. I'm trying to make sure my headphones don't make it worse. I'm also trying to sort of listen to for my kids, in case my wife starts screaming that she needs help. Okay, so listen to it. Right after Stephen Meyer, he's got Duncan Trussel. Duncan is one of Joe's really good friends. And Duncan was raised an Episcopalian. Duncan's his own being now. He has some very interesting beliefs, and he certainly wouldn't. Well, I actually really love Duncan. I think his interviews with Joe are great. But listen to what he says. Tell me if I'm crazy or if I'm picking up on something here. Good friend of Joe Rogan's says this.
This is where being raised an Episcopalian, in the book of Revelations, as a Christian, you're going to read it.
Okay. And now that's super nuanced there. That's super, this little teeny phrase. But this clip showed up again in my YouTube feed. And when I heard him say that, I heard it in a different way. And again, maybe I'm making this up, but he says, as a Christian, you're going to read it. He says, the book of Revelation, as a Christian, you're going to read it. He gestures to Joe Rogan when he says that.
You know what I mean? Like
one day in the future, everything will be traceable.
That's right. And that's, this is where being raised an Episcopalian, in the book of Revelations, as a Christian, you're going to read it. This is.
Am I making this up? Am I reading too much into this? As a Christian, you're going to read it. Now, I talked to Christian Baxter about this. What conversation did they have before this?
I don't even do anything interesting with.
Okay.
And you can. That's, this is where being raised an Episcopalian, in the book of Revelations, as a Christian, you're going to read it.
Do you see that? He says, as a Christian, he gestures his hand towards Joe and says, as a Christian, you're going to read it. No, I did not. Cat's Eye. Hugh Ross's interview on Julian Dorrit. No. Good recommendation. I'll have to check it out. There's so much. I was raised as a Christian. You're going to read it. Referring to people raised like him. Okay. Thank you. Okay, good. I like that because I want to hear some feedback. I was raised, and as a Christian, you're going to read it. And Joe was raised a Catholic. So there's something, okay, it could just be that he's sort of making a gesture generally. Now, I will say there was a conversation before this. Joe and Duncan talked offline. There was a conversation before this, and I'm not here saying I think Joe Rogan has become a Christian, or even that I think Joe Rogan is going to become a sort of Christian. If he becomes a Christian, it's not going to be like what most people. It's not going to be like a mainline normie evangelical. Let's just say that. That's for sure. But I wonder if they talked before this. And Joe is sort of recovering from episode 208. And I don't know, like, shoot, I messed it up. I don't know. Let's see if it just comes up if I type 2008. I don't know when they record these. Shoot, I should have my tabs ready. Shouldn't I just be able to go to the next one? No, I'll have to scroll all the way down. They might have recorded the Stephen Meyer episode. No, that's not true because he mentions the Stephen Meyer episode to Duncan. I shouldn't have done this. I should just type it in the thing. Sorry, this is annoying. Because he does mention JRE, what was it? What did we say? 208. There it is. 208, Stephen Meyer. 209, Duncan Trussel. And when Joe is talking to Duncan in this interview, he does mention that he had just talked to Stephen Meyer. So I find it a little fascinating, and it's the teeniest, tiniest little glimpse. And I know I'm probably like going too deep, too small of a clip to make a big deal out of it. But it just, when I heard it again, I went, wait a second. As a Christian, you're gonna read it? Like, did Joe say to Duncan, hey man, I've been thinking. I just sat down with this guy, Stephen Meyer. He's a Christian. he's super smart. Like, he's obviously thought about this stuff. He's got all these reasons for believing in God. And he goes into the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And I think that is a strong, strong point. And I think Joe still has some sort of misgivings about the Bible and the nature of the Bible, which is where the Diana Walsh Pasulka interview comes in. And I just wonder if he was chatting with Duncan and he just said, I think for the first, like, I'm looking back into it, because I do think Joe was raised Catholic, as far as I know. And it was not a good experience for him. There was some, you can hear it in his voice. And if you go back, who was saying 7 years ago, if you go back, Mandy pointed this out. If you go back 7 years ago, I mean, Joe is antagonistic towards the Bible, for sure. And now, not so much. And this interview with Diana, I think is like, it's almost like it could be a missing piece of the puzzle. Because if you listen to their interview, it's not like they talk a ton about Christianity or anything like that. They talk about the nature of the spiritual world. They even talk at one point about angels and demons. I haven't gotten to that part yet. Yeah, exactly. And so think about this. And what Mandy's saying is, if you go back years ago to see where Joe Rogan was, just mocking Christianity openly, and still to some degree still has some of this. But to be talking to Diana, to be talking to Stephen Meyer, to be sitting down with Stephen Meyer and talking about the possibility of the miracle of the resurrection of Jesus without being like openly mocking. Again, I wonder, in some ways, there's a sense in which the Joe Rogan podcast, and we'll talk about this as this live stream goes on, because I have some thoughts about the nature of dialogue and our sort of digital dialogue world that we're living in. In some ways, Joe Rogan's podcast is big enough to sort of inform the zeitgeist. But also, it's just a barometer. I think that it is popular because Joe and his guests are bringing up the things that are kind of approachable to everybody else. Like, everybody else is kind of thinking about this. He has friends that live a beautiful lives of faith. Okay, and this is where I go back to the Adam Curry episode. I'm sorry, if you're listening to this after the fact, I've been really bad about putting these live streams on the actual podcast. So, but I will generally just send out the audio version of this. And so, we're just sort of scrolling through a year of Strange Theology. And where am I? Here. We're getting close. Where's the Adam Curry episode? It's here, right here. It's 1 year ago. I think that, and again, I don't want to make too much of this, but Adam Curry, it was another one of Joe's good friends. And this episode blew my mind. This is what motivated me, put me over the edge to actually start my own podcast. And I don't know, Adam hasn't been back on the Joe Rogan podcast since then. But the fact that Joe has friends like Adam Curry, who Adam Curry went on Joe's podcast and just basically said, hey, Jesus, I've been thinking about Jesus. And the more I think about Jesus, the more I think that this is what really happened. And it sort of took Joe a little while to digest that, I think. But a year ago, he had Adam Curry on. And then not only is he interviewing like people like Stephen Meyer, who are like overtly Christian, but other people are popping onto his podcast and like slipping into sort of spirituality and Jesus talk. Russel Brand is on there talking about his experience with AA. Jordan Peterson comes on and has that beautiful moment where he talks about how the Bible is is not just truth. It's the precondition for the manifestation of all truth. And if you're looking at the Joe Rogan podcast the last year, I wonder if you're seeing what is happening sort of in a lot of people's lives. Okay, so he's not actually angry at Jesus. He's more angry at the corruption in the churches, which is hard for some people to rise above. I think you're exactly right. In fact, I was listening to another podcast today on Grail Country, and I caught just a little bit of it. Let me see if I can find it. And I got that sense from one of the guys that was on there. It was hard for me to hear him talk about Christianity because I felt like the version of Christianity he was giving was so far removed from what I have encountered in Christianity. It was this one.
All right.
Sorry, I don't need the audio. But it was this Grail Country conversation. Whoa, that's big. That's a big Luke face right there. But it was where? Let me find it. It was here. Yeah. T-Grog is sharing his experience, and it's similar. Just seeming like a lot of people in the Christian world are kind of faking it. And if that's the case, I don't know that I want it. I don't know that I want that. And I wonder if you're right, that Joe's experience is probably close to that. Frankly, my experience is close to that. Like, I did not want to become a Christian. I guess that's a simple way of saying it. I did not want to become a Christian. And I don't even know that I found Jesus. It's like Jesus found me, and then I had spent the last 25 years trying to make sense of that. Okay, so he might have had Stephen Meyer on because he's good friends with Brian Cullen. And Cullen had him on before Joe. Oh. We need to look at that. Debating Michael Shermer. And Joe has had Michael Shermer on. And as an atheist, I think Michael Shermer was pretty safely, I could call him an atheist, did not do well with Joe. Joe kind of sniffed out some of his BS pretty quick, I think. So that's an interesting connection. Okay. Stephen Meyer, Brian Cullen, and maybe even this Michael Shermer connection. Okay. And so obviously Joe in the background has been doing a lot of thinking. He's been doing a lot of thinking about these things. And I think a lot of people are. I think that's one of the reasons his podcast is so important. And here's what's so funny for those of you that are interested in this kind of stuff. So you remember Adam Curry. Adam Curry a year ago was on Joe Rogan, going back to current day, going back to the present day. And I think I left a link to this one if you guys haven't watched it yet. Going back to this, it was a year ago, almost to the day. It was definitely the same month that he had Adam Curry on and then interviewed Diana. So there's something to that in my mind. There's not no reason for that. There's, maybe it was, accident or whatever, but 1 year ago, it was from Adam Curry going on and basically saying, yeah, I gave my life to Jesus, to Joe interviewing Diana, who was just such a perfect fit, right? I think she's the missing puzzle. She's Catholic Christian. She's got some, I'll just say, interesting ideas. Obviously, I think if I sat down long enough with Diana, I'd find something. We'd find areas where we disagree. But she, how to say it? She didn't talk churchy language. She doesn't talk Christianese, and she knows enough about aliens that it was really intriguing. Okay. Yeah, good call on the Michael Shermer connection. There is probably something. Yeah, those scandals sort of alienate us from the faith. I love that, but never stop loving Jesus despite what happened, and that's so key. And I think in this podcast they do touch on the nature of evil, and sort of the abuse there, and and I do think that for some people that drives them away from Christianity. For others, it will drive you to Christianity, or really to the person of Jesus, because even the word Christianity can be sort of misunderstood. But yeah, and just to be able to have that open conversation, and even to hear Diana saying, I've thought a lot about the problem of evil, and then I should find this picture. They go into Plato's cave. They go into the discussion about Plato's cave around that time. Let me see if I can find this, because I actually thought I found a pretty decent representation of sort of Plato's cave art. Yeah. And it was kind of around the topic of evil and people sort of controlling the narrative. And that's exactly what it is. Yeah. My view on the UAP, okay, I can try to get to that. But I think we're here, and I think dialogue is part of, and again, if you're just listening to this, we're looking at a picture of Plato's cave, and the basic format of it is you have people bound and chained behind a wall so that the only thing they can see in front of them is the back end of the cave wall where shadows are being projected. And it's really important to remember that this is everyone's, the people that are chained and bound, they've accepted this reality. This is the reality that they have accepted, and they just don't know anything else. And yet behind the wall are these puppet masters, if you will, these people that are holding up images that project the shadows on the wall because there's a fire in front of them, and the shadows are projected on the wall for the people that are bound and chained. And then they talked about what Diana said, and this is one point where I would definitely disagree with her. She in the conversation about evil and sort of this, where we're sort of in this condition, we're in a dark cave, chained and bound. Who can rescue us, right? She was saying, all we can do is work on ourselves. And that is part of the conversation. But how do I work on myself? And I just shared this. I think more so than anything, I don't know that I found Jesus. I think Jesus found me. And then I tried to make sense of that. And it takes Jesus, who's not in the cave. He's in the heavenly realm. He's free. It takes the person of Jesus descending to then reveal to us our chains, reveal to us that we're in a dark hole, and reveal to us that we're really grasping at the shadows of the forms. And it's the revelation of God, taking us back to the Bible, that is going to that we need to sort of make sense of reality. And again, I thought Diana was a great person to have on. And this kind of takes us to one of the parts. So one of the things that I like to do in this live stream is sort of go into things that I had to leave on the sort of cutting room floor. Even though the podcast that I put out was an hour long, there's still things left unsaid. Like I didn't really go into the UAP phenomenon much. And partly that is because I have other podcasts that I've done directly related to that. Okay. Thanks to Plato's cave. Let me think about that. So Cat's Eye says this universe is a projection from a purer universe from God. Or are you saying that the universe is God? And I can visualize this with Epistis Sophia. I'm gonna have to look that up. Okay, so Epistis Sophia, epistemal. Okay, the knowledge, wisdom. Where are we here? Okay, and this is one of the. I thank you for bearing with me as I sort of read some of the comments. I do want to get them right. I do think that sometimes I move from sort of verbally processing things to then trying to read people's comments, and it's interesting to think about it when it comes to even the nature of dialogue. And maybe I can just share my notes here. They'll just be here hanging out, so we have something to look at because we're in a visual format here. But the dialogos. This is something I didn't exactly break down. I just sort of mentioned my definition, or a definition that I have. You can look up Dagmar Heller, and actually I should get a link to that article. But we're moving from sort of this embodied speech, that what I'm doing is sort of talking, and to a written language. So I'm reading your comments, and I'm like, okay, I think I can get my brain around this, but I might have to look that up as I sort of switch from the dialogue, the sort of embodied word, to the written word, and actually going back to Luke and in the live stream on Grail Country. It was Luke who made this point about sort of disembodied speech, or I think I'm saying that wrong, but he's basically talking about how words, if we write them down, we're sort of like pulling the spirit from the word, and it sort of becomes a different thing. So there's something to that, and dialogue is, and I think this is why Joe Rogan's podcast is important. I think this is why it's potent for people. I think this is why people continue to listen. And what is he doing? He's just having a conversation. He's just talking to people. It's just dialogue. And maybe one of the reasons he's able to do it well is because he's having a dialogue with his friends. People he knows, for the most part. And they're very comfortable with each other, and they have a way of talking that is intriguing for those listening. But it's also because there's just an innate power in the dialogue. I don't know if this is annoying. I'll just have this up, and what is that? So give me back to my notes here. Dagmar Heller's definition is this: the dialogos is, and for those of you who know John Vervaeke's work, I think he sort of defines this slightly different, and I'm not familiar enough with John Vervaeke to sort of step into those waters just yet, but I'm working on it. In an essay called Reflections on the Different Forms of Inter-Christian Dialogue and Their Purposes, this would be very much this little corner of the internet type of conversation. The article was like, to download the whole thing was expensive, so I didn't. So I just read the excerpts. I confess, but it sounds fascinating. Reflections on the different form of inter-Christian dialogue. So he's speaking from a Christian perspective, and they're talking about how different churches should be able to talk to each other. That's kind of it's part of a bigger collection of books or collection of essays, and this was his title. I thought it was really good. The word dialogue traces its origins to the Greek dialogos. Okay, logos is word. But it can also be more generally just speech. And the dia means through. And this is where most people will kind of stop. It's the idea of through, the idea of if you and I are talking, we're sort of able to see through or talk through something, but it also carries with it the idea of movement, okay, going through something. And as I listen to these sort of digital dialogues that are happening, I almost think about, I hear people saying things like, I'm going to push on that for a second. And there's something to that, because you could push somebody through something, but you can also pull somebody through something. And I wonder if dialogue in a way is sort of like a bandana. What am I saying? A rubber band, a band that stretches. And so as I pull, you kind of get pulled with it a little bit, and then you kind of pull a little bit back, and I get pulled with it. And there certainly is that with dialogue, the idea of the logos, the word through. We're moving through a dialogue. We're moving from point A to point B as we sort of shift, we sort of move each other. So I thought that was good. Dia, therefore, suggests like a kind of movement. Okay, this is good. So dialogos may be understood as the word that moves, or a multi-directional exchange of speech. And in a way, this idea of movement carries with it the idea of spirit. Okay? breath. That is what dialogue is. That is what story is. It's the word that is given to us. It's word, but it's also breath. And we as human creatures, we were made to understand the logos, the story, the word, connected to the person, connected to breath, connected to spirit, and things that move in the ancient world were seen to be living things. Movement implied life, and so there's something to this. I really thought Dagmar Heller's definition was really good. The word dialogue traces its origin to Greek dialogos, speech. This idea, therefore, it suggests movement. So dialogos may be the word that moves. I thought that was really good. Now you're touching on the Tower of Babel. That's a sweet spot for me. Yeah, we're children of the builders of the Tower of Babel. We still recovering from the mistranslations, but coming together nice. Okay, this is okay. There's something to that as well that I need to unpack more fully. Let me get to that. Let me see if I can pull back. You know what? We're not listening to any clips. I don't need my headphones. What am I doing? I'm struggling here. They also make my ears really hot. So now I get to fan myself. So I wonder. Okay, so I'm gonna remember the Tower of Babel here. I wonder if the Bible, and this is part of a project that I'm working on that I'm not quite ready to talk more fully about, but I'll probably be leaving hints here and there. So the Bible is the Bible. This is a question for you guys. Is the Bible unique in its ability to be a written logos, the word, and embodied? Okay, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. John chapter 1. So the word of God is living and active. Now, if I knew my addresses, I could be able to tell you what Bible verse that is. The word is living and active, sharper than a double-edged sword. Okay, it divides bone and marrow, soul and spirit. I mean, it pierces. It's very direct, but it's living and active. It's the dialogos, therefore, suggests movement, life. The Spirit of God is within us, and that is how the Word of God is living. And again, I'm working through this. Spirit, the Spirit is connected to the Word in maybe a way that is sort of mysterious to us. But when I read Scripture, and takes me back to Joe Rogan, if you're going to read the Bible, man, if you're going to read the Bible is going to read you back. It's going to read you as much as you read it, and he's there, man. I will say, I know we were hypothesizing with Duncan Trussel's sort of gesture to Joe. As a Christian, you'll read the book of Revelation. That's hypothesis, and again, I don't know that. There are some people that and certainly I'm praying for Joe Rogan, but there are people that are way more confident that Joe is going to become a Christian. I'm still somewhat pessimistic on that, but I'm not. But ultimately, God could do whatever. God is sincerely powerful. Walk through. I think eventually he will find Jesus. I do think that. How people will define whatever Joe is, I think, is maybe another conversation. But I think he's reading the Bible. He even brought up the book of Ezekiel. He brought up Ezekiel chapter 1 to Diana. He's certainly, and Joe is the type of person who can obsess about something until he figures it out, and something is under his skin right now. He is going to pick and prod and pull and figure it out. And if he and when he does, the whatever 30 million people or whatever, I mean, that's too much, but the millions of people that listen to his podcast are going to listen to whatever conclusion he comes to. Now, there is a small part of me that thinks Joe could very easily create a cult. So we'll keep our sort of tinfoil hats on for this one. But yes, Jesus is the Word of the way. Yes, so there's something about the Bible, right? There's something about the Bible that is powerful, and Joe is encountering this, I think. Yes, Jesus when Jesus' battle is only one. This is just a cleanup project. Yeah, and so God knows the day. God knows the day for Joe, for all of us. And we're here sort of encouraging each other along the way. So I appreciate you guys being here. There's something about the Bible that's unique in human history, that's unique within the human experience. It's certainly, and I can kind of speak from my sort of Christian worldview. It is authoritative on all matters of life and faith. It is the authoritative Word of God, and other things, poetry, maybe lyrics of a song can in similar ways sort of inspire you or lead you or encourage you. But ultimately, the Word of God is unique. It has a power, and I talked about this very briefly, and this is where I will go probably for the remainder of the year, unless something changes. I talked about this in my my attempt at having a catchy Christian apologetics thumbnail, but I actually started putting more text on the thumbnails. I don't know; it's an experiment. When I did the ontological argument, that the Bible, actually, it was this. Let me think back. Hold on. It was actually this one. Joe Rogan is confronting the Bible. The Bible's confronting him back. Is that the Bible? There's a unique power to the Bible that the community of people who we call the church, the people of God, identify with that. So the Bible strikes people. The Bible touches people. Billions of people throughout human history have come into contact with the Word of God, and it's like there's something there, more so than the greatest Pablo Neruda poem that you've ever read. As beautiful as some of that poetry is, as beautiful as maybe Lord of the Rings nerds, maybe yes, it's so good, but this is even better. It hits me on a different level that is I'll just go ahead and invoke the word mystery. It is mysterious the way I as a person interact with the Bible. It's unlike any other work of history, even though I fully recognize that those works of history can inform the soul. I like this. The Father is thought, the Mother is action of thinking, and the Son is thought motion. Gosh, it gets here, I need to do this. I need to type up so that, and I have a little bit of a delay. Thought in motion. Yeah, thought in motion. Okay, interesting. I like that. So the Bible is unique. I think Joe is finding that out. Oral cultures always had the word connected to breath. Written cultures, this I'm borrowing from Luke, written cultures have the word removed from the breath or removed from the spirit, and yet even the written word of God seems immune to this process, seems immune to this sort of stripping of the spirit of the breath, because when you write it down, there's no breath. This is in the beginning, God created Adam and breathed into him. He became breathed spirit into him. He became a living man. Does it say? Yeah, I could look it up. I mean, I literally have the Bible open right now. And we're sort of returning to this oral culture. And Joe Rogan's podcast is a clue to the fact that we are returning to an oral culture, right? This little corner of the internet, Paul Vanderklay, his project is another clue to that. I say his project. Paul would probably disagree with me on that. Our project, even though I would say I'm still somewhat adjacent, although I had a conversation with Christian Baxter today. I had a conversation with Chad and Michael, and so I'm getting sucked in. I'm very, very much a fan of this little corner and sort of the phenomenon of podcasting, particularly with regards to Joe Rogan. And it's part of a bigger project that I have, working out the idea that story is a tool. Okay, and I think this maybe gets us back to the Tower of Babel. Let me see if I have this. I worked on this right before this podcast, and I I didn't finish it, so you'll have to forgive me, but this is what I'm working on. This is my project. It's part of my project. And Tower of Babel is connected to this because Tower of Babel, in a way, is another is a way in which the tool, if you will, was perverted, right? We started not being able to understand each other's speech. And there's more to that given time we might be able to sort of unpack. But I was actually reading I'm reading a book by Martin Shaw called Smoke Hole, and it got me thinking about this. So, and for those of you who don't know, I have a background in classical studies, and so and I say that I feel like my degree got me started in the area of classical studies. It was a very good sort of foundational introduction, but that world is so vast that I never feel, in like theology, I never feel like I want to put myself out there as some sort of expert. I'm a journeyman. I'm a learner. I'm a thinker. In and amongst a bunch of other people that are on this journey. And I always say, just be wary of anybody who claims to be an expert in theology, because it should be the thing that humbles us the most. And so I'm working with the ideas of these Greek gods, and Martin Shaw's book Smoke Hole, and what has happened really since 2019, 2020. That's when Martin wrote this book, wrote Smoke Hole. So legend has it, Prometheus gave humanity fire as our first tool and suffered dearly for this. If you know the story of Prometheus, he was nailed to the side of a cliff, and he was nailed in the position that you would find somebody on the cross, interestingly. He suffered dearly for this, but fire is not humanity's first tool. Story is. And that was given to us by our Creator, who suffered even more than Prometheus. Story is a container for the transportation of knowledge in its most condensed form. But like fire, Prometheus is connected to fire, right? But like fire, story is more than a tool. It's more elemental. And like fire, story can create and destroy based on its use. God created Adam from the earth and breathed into him spirit. Earth and spirit, and Adam became a living man. Adam was given a garden and told that he could eat of any fruit in that garden except the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was the story, if you will, that God told to Adam. It was the message that God gave to Adam. But something happened in the message as it was handed down to Eve, if you've ever noticed this in Genesis. By the time Eve tells the story to the serpent, it has changed. You shall not even touch the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So it's moved from eating of the fruit to touching. We can't even touch it. Eve says, well, God knows that in the day you will eat of it, you will be like him. This is what the serpent says, which is the deception. Adam and Eve were made in the image of God, and so the deception settles in where our practice of telling stories is misused. So we've gone from Prometheus to Hermes now. Hermes is the messenger of the gods, whose particular skill is to deliver messages one soul to another. But where the soul is not aroused, the message is not received. That's Martin Shaw works that out in his book. Where the soul is not prepared, the message is not received. Where the soul isn't prepared, the message isn't received. And today, we are communicating with all the speed of Hermes, but our soul has no time to mature. We are busy, we're tired, we're unprepared to receive the message. And so deception, just like in the garden, is invited in once again as people come into contact with words only. Without story or spirit, people are left to react where once they could ruminate. They could ingest the information slowly through the container of story. And having ingested it slowly or chewed on it, they could sort of spit out what they perceived was deception, something useful or unuseful. And there's a whole part that is about Narcissus, because Narcissus looked at his own image and fell in love with himself. But story allows us to empathize with someone else. We can have a moment of self-reflection, but not as we stare at ourselves. TikTok, Instagram. Story allows us to have a moment of self-reflection as we look upon someone else. And ultimately, that is Jesus. As we look upon Jesus, as we hear the story of Jesus, we see him and we know we will be like him. So the act of seeing is transformative. And that's where we're sort of here bound and chained. We're looking at the wrong images. We're looking at not even images, the shadows of the images. Story allows us to elevate our imagination and look upon someone else. And there's more to this. I would love to develop this more, but that's kind of at least as much as I got through to today. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, I'll probably post this on Twitter, and then you'll see it maybe trickle into some videos here and there. As I do more, I really do want to do some more content, if you will. I want to make other podcast episodes about the nature of the Bible. One of the things, and I didn't get back to so Babel is part of that. I'll get back to Babel. I'll tie Babel into this somewhere. There's something to it. Where was I? Joe, so even in Diana's interview, their dialogue, their conversation, he brings up Brian Murray Rescue, and he brings up the cross and the sacred mushroom. So Brian Murray Rescue wrote The Immortality Key, and then the cross and the sacred mushroom, and I don't remember who wrote that, but I dealt with it a little bit in the Mysterious Origins of Christianity, where I dealt with his Brian Murray Rescue interview, his most recent one. I think he's had him on multiple times, but that was, in a way, you see this with people, they get really close to something, and I think Diana was sort of pushing on something. She wasn't trying to push on anything, but Joe has this sort of exit strategy. He's like, have you heard of these two books by these two guys? Because that still allows him to kind of hold Christianity or hold the Bible at a little bit of a distance. Because Brian Murray Rescue, both of those books are pretty critical of maybe what you would say is maybe like sort of the conventional scholarship around the canon, around the sacred books of the Bible. And sort of allowed him a little bit of a pressure release, a little bit of a parachute to jump out of the conversation, because Diana didn't know much about those works. She was familiar with Brian Murray Rescue because Murray Rescue is tying Christianity to the Eleusinian mystery cult, and as a professor of religion, she was familiar with that. Okay, so they would realize they were naked and ashamed. God made them clothes. Yeah, the birth of consciousness. And then the journey begins, the journey of man's to be one with God again. And yeah, I wonder, and to be one, what would that mean? I tend to think of harmony. Curious to get more on that. There is something to that. How are we united with God? The clothes are interesting because I'm actually preaching a sermon on Cain coming up, so that'll be interesting. But Cain and his brother Abel, and there's this clothes. So Cain's sacrifice goes back to the garden and the tree and the fruit. Abel's sacrifice is the innocent life on the behalf of the guilty. It's the firstlings of his flock. It's a living creature that he sacrifices. And I think that's tied to God creating clothes for Adam and Eve. It's very interesting the way the Bible says that. Like, where did the clothes come from? Where did God create clothes for Adam and Eve? There's something to that, because they are spirit, man. And maybe I'll just go to that, and because I keep tripping over this in Genesis. Oh man, is it? It's got to be 2, right? Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let him rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sea. God created man in his own image. God be created. So yeah, it's 2. Gotta go to 2. Gotta go to 2. Gotta go to the second telling, the retelling. And I went too far. Oh, I'm sorry. This is so annoying. This is too big. That's part of what it is. Oh, there we go. This is the account of the heavens and the earth where God created the day of the Lord. There was no shrub of the field. There was no plant in the field. God had not sent rain, no shrub, no plant, no rain, and no man, no Adam, to cultivate the ground. Mist. Where is... This is where I'm so bad at the... Yeah, the creation of flesh. That was what I was thinking. Is the clothing the creation of flesh? Why am I totally missing this? Yeah. Yeah, so there was a flesh. God did something. I'm trying to find where God breathes into Adam, and it's right in front of me, but my poor dyslexic mind. Okay, well, this let me find it really quick. And I'm sorry. This is the nature of the live stream. You sort of go into an area where I don't have a tab for that. I didn't expect to talk about that, but I love that we're talking about. And I know this is so painful because you guys are probably looking at it going, it's right there, it's verse whatever. But it's like my eyes start to cross 2:7. 2:7. It's literally right in front of my face. I'm in chapter 1 here, right? Okay? That's chapter 1. Lord help me. 2:7. Dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Okay, that's what it is. That's where I'm tripping up on this. The word being. Yeah, made the clothes from animal. Yeah, let me find that. He became a living soul. This word, I think, is I need to do more work here on this. But we can look at it really quick. It is translated, okay, soul, soul's life, person, person's lives, himself, you, desire. Sometimes they give you a little bit of an etymology. Yeah, so it could be used for animals. So there is a little bit of a connotation that when Adam was created, it was with flesh, but it's not really solid. He became a living being. So did he have skin? That's the question that we're asking. Okay, and then they fall. They realize they're naked. Genesis 2:21, the Lord made garments of skin. That is just, it's so interesting. The Lord made garments of skin. Is that the skins of the animals? Is that he's making their own skin for Adam and his wife and clothe them? But it doesn't tell us where God gets skin. We assume, to some degree, my assumption is often that an animal had to be sacrificed for the making of the garments of skin, which is in some way tied to Abel's sacrifice. The reason God has regard for Abel's sacrifice is that Abel understood what God was doing, and Cain didn't. Cain is looking back to the Garden of Eden He's not looking forward to the New Jerusalem. He's not looking forward to what God is going to do, the redemption of humanity. And in a sense, a new garden. If you go to John chapter 19, you guys ready for this? We're doing a little Bible study. We'll do a little Bible study. Oh man, this is so good. It's a retelling of the garden. Ooh, took the outer garments. Whoa. They took Jesus' outer garments. I'm just going to leave that there. Oh man, where was Jesus buried? This is good. Now the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And this is what Abel is looking into this. Abel is looking towards this, where Cain is looking back to the old garden. Okay. I'm reading comments. I'm listening. I'm hearing. I'm ruminating a little bit. Okay. Now, and this is what Abel understood. Now, in the place where he was crucified, so again, there's a sacrifice. Okay. Someone has been sacrificed. In this case, it's the person Jesus. It's not an animal for the making of garments. It's not Abel's sacrifice, which is the firstlings of his flock. But both of those things are gesturing to this moment. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. And there's the three-tiered holy space. If you look at the Garden of Eden, it says, in the east, there was in the east, there was Eden, and in Eden, there was a garden, 3 tiers. The temple is 3-tiered holy space, the outer court, the inner court, and the holy place. The place where Jesus is buried is 3 tiers as well. There was, in the place where he was crucified, okay, so where's the place? There's the place he was crucified. What was in that place? There was a garden. And what was in the garden? A new tomb. I just love this so much. And why does Mary think that Jesus is a gardener? Because she's in a garden. She's in a new garden. And this is what he's doing. We are down here in Plato's cave, dark. We're bound, and all we see are the shadows of the image. We don't see what he's doing. We're sort of like Cain in that. We're not like Abel. Abel saw something. Abel could see that his sacrifice, the sacrifice of Abel, needed to be like this sacrifice. So what does he sacrifice? He sacrifices the firstlings of his flock, the innocent new birth animal becomes Abel's sacrifice. Why? Because he saw Yahweh making garments of skin as a covering. This is important. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. He is the true sacrifice. These are sort of pointing to, but Abel understood this, right? So his sacrifice reflected the sacrifice of God, and that's probably where we sort of end transmission here, right? Is what do we then do? We live a life. We have a living sacrifice. Our life needs to reflect this sacrifice that we see in the person of Jesus. And what happens? This cave, this tomb, is transformed into a garden. It's up here, right? We're this. That wasn't in my thinking when we started this live stream. Was that we would connect Plato's cave to the tomb of Jesus, but there it is. And I wonder, going full circle, I wonder where we are with this dialogue. I wonder where we are with Joe. I wonder where we are with this. But I think that's it. in the place where he was crucified, there's a garden. In the garden, there was a new tomb, which no one had yet been laid. So when he resurrected in a garden. Yeah, this is the explanation for the Big Bang. And there's more layers to that. It's like we're opening all these Russian nesting dolls, and each side one Russian nesting doll is like 7 other Russian nesting dolls. And you get to the 7th and you open it, and it's a whole other cosmology, a whole other universe that opens up. Because, I mean, we're taking this to the Big Bang. It's like, yeah, there's actually something to that, because in him we live and move and have our being. He holds everything together. And the Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. And I think that's what happens when we read the Bible. I think that's what I meant when I said it was sort of a mysterious thing, why the Bible sort of hits me different than others is there is this embodied logos. There's the embodiment of the Word. We're getting back to that. And so, hey, thank you guys for being here. I do appreciate it. I appreciate anytime you comment, share this. Again, if you're catching this after the live stream, share your questions. In some ways, it's awesome that there's sort of 2 versions of this. There's the live version, and then there's the one that sort of sits there, and you can sort of listen to it and pick and choose the bits that you want to chew on. And man, I do enjoy this. I really do. I really thought that live streaming, I would be super nervous, but I love catching these moments with you guys. And so I will look forward to the next live stream we have, which should be next Tuesday or Wednesday. And I just look forward to reading more of your comments and catching you guys next time. There is a little bit of a stream delay, so bear with me as I probably just sort of hummed myself here for a second.